Thank you for joining us on the Look Up Mindset podcast, where real stories of resilience, transformation, and adventure come to life. I'm your host, author, and storyteller, Heidi Siefkas. Each episode, we dive into the journeys of sheroes, heroes, and badasses who faced life's toughest moments and chose to rise. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's be inspired together. Welcome to the Look Up Mindset podcast. I'm your host, author Heidi Siefkas. In today's episode, Lessons from a Survivor, we have a special guest, my friend, peer author, Mariah Forster Olson. Welcome to the Look Up Mindset, Mariah.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you. I love hearing your story. And in this community, we let people self-introduce because so many of us have had poor introductions and you know yourself better than I do. So the floor is yours, Mariah.
I am from Galesville, Wisconsin originally, which is a town of about 1,300 people. I did go to the same school district that Heidi went to. I am disabled, so I do not have a conventional job, but I do work from my couch and my laptop for about 10 different childhood cancer nonprofit organizations. I also, as Heidi said, am an author. I published my memoir recently called Hope Over Despair. And I also play the oboe in a variety of community ensembles. So I managed to keep busy.
Many people ask me, how do I find guests for this podcast, or how did I find contributors to the book? And so I'm going to piggyback on that introduction that Mariah and I know each other from Galesville, Wisconsin. We went to the same school district all the way from K through 12. We had similar interest, one of them being music. And Mariah did accompany me as I was a soloist, a vocal soloist in high school. And when I thought about real life stories of heroes and sheroes that I knew in my life, I thought about Mariah. And when you're kids, you don't necessarily know what your peer students or families are going through. But I thought, well, now would be a good time to discover the real truth. And I reached out to Mariah to contribute to my latest book, which is Look Up Global Stories of Resilience. So this is where the storytelling begins. And like any good play or movie, we have to set the scene. So, Mariah, could you give us some of the details as to where and when your story starts?
Sure. So my story begins in 1980 when I was 1 year old. It was actually just about 2 weeks after my first birthday. My parents brought me into the doctor because I was having trouble breathing. And like so many before me, I was misdiagnosed several times with asthma, pneumonia, bronchitis. But an x-ray was finally done, and a, quote, shadow was seen over the right side of my chest. Doctors in La Crosse told my parents that they needed to go to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which is about an hour and 15, 20 minutes away from us, for treatment. Yet they didn't tell my parents what the suspected diagnosis was. So my parents on June 6, 1980, were at Mayo Clinic, and I had a thoracotomy surgery, which is quite major. And that surgery was supposed to take several hours, but after a short amount of time, the surgeon came back to my parents and talked to them and said, we were unable to do the surgery, and started talking to them like they knew what was going on. And basically, he told them that I had neuroblastoma, which is a type of childhood cancer consisting of a solid tumor, that my tumor grew out of 7 levels of my spine, wrapped around part of my heart, and pushed against my trachea and lungs, making it difficult to breathe. The reason why they could not do the surgery at that time was because the tumor was too large and intricately involved to remove. So I had 18 total radiation treatments, another surgery to remove the tumor. And then what ultimately saved my life was 2 years of an experimental chemotherapy protocol. So that is the beginning of my story. It was difficult. I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember some of the chemotherapy treatments because I had it from age 1 to 3. Where we take place in Heidi's book mainly is 5 years after the last chemotherapy treatment, which was the last treatment for my cancer. I was finally pronounced cancer-free. I was the age of 8, and that 5-year is kind of a magical number. If you get 5 years past treatment without any relapse or recurrence, they pronounced me cancer-free or no evidence of disease. So that was very exciting. You think that with treatment being over, that everything with the cancer is finished. That's far from the truth. You start survivorship at that point. And especially with childhood cancer, survivorship is a lifelong journey. And that's why I titled my book, Hope Over Despair, Childhood Cancer and the Lifelong Journey of Survivorship. So that's where we take place in Heidi's book. And it was 1987 when I was age 8.
I was talking to another contributor and I mentioned a little bit of your story because you said an experimental treatment called chemotherapy, which now it's a lot more commonplace. So it just goes to show that you and your family were trailblazers.
Yeah, the chemotherapy experimental treatment at the time was using a combination of medications. And it was so new that instead of being a clinical trial, which is what we hear of today, it was called an experimental treatment.
And the survivorship, there was a celebration, or it was a lot of celebrations on that day. Could you explain what else was happening on that day?
Yeah, well, 5 years prior, the last day of my chemotherapy treatment was on my birthday. So I had a cake, and being 3 years old at the time, I thought that it was just for my birthday, but it was actually to celebrate the end of treatment, more so than my birthday. And then when I was finally pronounced cancer-free, I also was at the doctor that day, but it was a pretty important, pivotal point for us. So it was a good doctor appointment to be at.
So a portion of your story is in adulthood that you want to share, because all of those things that happened in childhood have a ripple effect into your early adulthood and into now.
Yes. Childhood cancer may occur during childhood, but the effects of it can last a lifetime. And there are what are called late effects that can occur. And late effects are medical conditions that can occur from months to decades after treatment for childhood cancer. And so I have around 100 different medical conditions and late effects that I deal with. I've had 52 different surgeries. I have chronic, excruciating, severe bone, muscle, and nerve pain in my back and neck at all times, every day, all the time. And then I also walk with a cane and use a wheelchair for long distances. So I have quite a few medical conditions that are a result of my cancer, as well as the treatments that I had for my cancer.
Could you explain a little bit what your today looks like?
Sure. So I get up, I'm in pain, but I want to make the most of life. And my parents really taught me to focus on hope, optimism, and positivity as a child. And that kind of is carried over into adulthood. They also taught me a lot about Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. He was an American minister and author who wrote a book of the same title. I've decided to devote my life to helping childhood cancer patients, families, and survivors. And I work with about 10 different childhood cancer nonprofits in a variety of capacities. Also, I was writing my book up until it was published at the end of July. So I keep pretty busy. And even though it does give me extra pain, I still play the oboe in different ensembles because music is so important to me, and it really helps me get my feelings out there. And if I'm going to be in pain anyway, I might as well do something that I love to do.
So the through line in all of this first season of Look Up Mindset is that they contributed to the Look Up book. And Look Up is a mantra I created with 2 tenets to remind us the powers that we have to be in the moment and find the upside. And I think you mentioned a little bit how your story connects to it, but could you expand upon that?
Absolutely. So I really connect to the Look Up Mindset. We have similar perspectives, and that is that I really focus on hope, optimism, and positivity. I like to achieve those perspectives through a number of ways. Music, as we discussed, is one of those ways. My faith is one. Constantly pursuing knowledge and is another. I also have a very close inner circle that love and support me. And I also, through giving back with the childhood cancer nonprofits, is a huge part of it. So those are kind of the tenets that I look at to help me achieve the Look Up mindset. And I like to try to talk about that with people. And no matter how difficult of a situation I'm in, I try to focus on the silver lining of a situation. At times, of course, it can be difficult, but I like to challenge myself to do that. Just because with all of the late effects that I deal with, as well as just the stories that I hear with the work that I do, it could be very easy to get down. And I just don't want to live life in that way. So that's why I like to focus on that Look Up mindset.
What would you tell someone who is going through childhood cancer or who is supporting the caregivers of someone who's going through childhood cancer?
There's a lot of things that are available today that were not available to my parents. In fact, I've developed a few programs for survivors that basically were based off of me not having those things available. But to caregivers, to patients, to survivors, I would say try to find the silver lining of a situation. Try to focus on that hope, optimism, and positivity mindset. It's very difficult when you're in the middle of things to see that there is a way out of it. But I would say lean on the people in your life and lean on the resources that are provided to you, because there's some really important ones that have been developed and some really important organizations that are doing some wonderful work in the childhood cancer community.
There's 2 things that everyone is almost singing as if are in a choir together in these stories of survivorship or resilience, transformation. And it is that they reframed the situation, but they didn't do it all alone.
I would say too that, so I did not find the childhood cancer community until I was in my mid to late 30s, which is a long time. But I always felt, kind of like a freak because all these medical issues would come up. And I never felt like I totally belonged anywhere. And until I got involved with the childhood cancer community, that is, I really felt like I found my people. And it was a place where I did not have to explain everything about me. They just inherently understood. And so, you talking about community and how important it is really does ring true. For me, as a long-term survivor, as well as for those just starting out, newly diagnosed and dealing with treatment.
Where could people find out more about you, your book, and some of the organizations that you work with or for?
Yeah, so my book is available for sale on both Amazon and Barnes & Noble. But you can also find information about me and my book at my website at www.hopeoverdespair.com. And on there, my social media platforms are attached as well. And then with the 10 different childhood cancer nonprofits, we are in the process of adding all of those to the website. I work with my sister-in-law. She is the one who does my website for me because I am not technically savvy. So yeah, she's wonderful with it, and we're in the process of updating it.
Two other things that maybe we have in common. Not super tech savvy, so we enlist the A-team, as well as
Yes.
Mariah and I have been known to be overachievers. So if there's a feather to put in our caps, we're going to do it. Well, thank you,
Yes.
Mariah, for joining us for the Look Up Mindset today. Thanks for sharing your story in Look Up Global Stories of Resilience. Thank you for joining us. If you liked this episode, please tune in for the next one, subscribe, and share with someone who may need a dose of inspiration. Until next time, here's to looking up. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Look Up Mindset podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If the story inspired you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a boost. And remember, Look Up is always at your fingertips, whenever and wherever you need it. Until next time, here's to looking up.